At this place in history, we're in Brookfield at the famous floating bridge. I'm with Executive Director of the Vermont Historical Society, Steve Perkins. Hello.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Well, we've invited Perry Kasich, who is with the Brookfield Historical Society, who's going to tell us all about this really cool bridge.
I'm so excited. Let's go. So as the name implies, the floating bridge is floating, right?
It's floating right here.
How does that work?
Well, it has 10 pontoons under it that were made out of space-age material, the kind of stuff you make jet planes out of, that are all linked together. And then once those pontoons were put in place, then the bridge itself, the oak bridge, was laid on top of that. And that's how this bridge is constructed. But it's much different than the former bridges.
Multiple bridges in this spot. How far back are we talking? When was the first one built?
The first one was built around 1820. That was a result of the fact that in 1813, a guy named Daniel Belknap was crossing the lake in the wintertime because people used that as the thoroughfare from the two sides of the town. Unfortunately, the ice was too thin. He fell through and drowned. So as a result, around 1820, townsfolk decided to build a bridge made basically of logs strapped together that they built on the ice, and then when the ice melted in the spring, they had a floating bridge, very rudimentary floating bridge. That was the first bridge, and after that there were 6 more bridges until this one.
Wow.
So that first bridge was kind of your Huck Finn raft, as it were.
Absolutely. It must have been awfully wobbly, I think.
I can't imagine how slippery it was side to side.
Yes.
How did the technology improve over time?
Well, I'll tell you how they did it. First it was logs, then eventually they strapped barrels underneath it. Eventually that then were coated with tar. Then once they went from the logs as the deck, they actually built a structure somewhat similar to this, not quite as nice, not with the 2 sidewalks. And they placed barrels in kind of a honeycomb placement, much like you'd have ice cubes in an ice cube tray upside down. And they were placed in there, so there was a whole lot of barrels in all these little compartments. Then eventually they attached chains to those barrels so they wouldn't move around as much. And the bridge before this one actually had plastic barrels with styrofoam in it. It's a tourist mecca. It's an icon in the county. It's very important to the entire county.
How many floating bridges are there in the United States?
2.
2.
2.
And this is one of them.
This is east of the Mississippi. This is the only wooden floating bridge. The other one that I'm aware of is in Washington State, which is a high-tech bridge as part of an interstate.
Wow. So set the scene for us. We're here on a chilly, blustery morning. If it was a warm summer day and you would come here, what would you see?
You would see a whole line of fishermen and fisherwomen up and down the 2 sidewalks, casting their nets. You'll notice up at the telephone lines up there, see all those hooks that are caught up there? That kind of decorates this line across above the bridge. So a whole lot of people fishing, and if it's a warm, nice summer day, there'd be a bunch of families in our little park over here having picnics and having the kids jumping off the bridge and swimming in the lake. This is actually part of Vermont Route 65. It was closed in 2008 because this bridge had sunk low enough that it was considered starting to be unsafe. Luckily, because Brookfield is a National Historic District, people started saying, well, if the village is a historic district, then the bridge must be a historic property. And as a result, it went way up on the list of priorities with the federal government in terms of historic preservation to be restored. And as a result, the federal government paid 80% of the cost of replacing the bridge, and it cost the state of Vermont only 20%, and it cost the people of Brookfield nothing.
From Brookfield's famous floating bridge at this place in history.